We're working on a water plan for our acreage here. We're trying to figure out how to keep the well healthy, how to manage the runoff in the winter, how to be good stewards of this little patch of dirt in Yamhill. It's not abstract for me. It's not a bumper sticker. It's the literal ground I walk on. If I poison this, I poison my chickens, which means I poison my kids and my friends. It's that simple. Loving the earth is just a long-term way of loving your neighbor. I'm Nick Walton. I'm a coffee roaster. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a wee little farmer, and I can't stop thinking about the invisible scripts that run our lives. You're listening to The Values Sort. This is a field guide to the values that shape the patterns of thinking and the behaviors that end up shaping our entire lives. This is essay number 24, Protection of the Environment. I don't know if I've made the mechanics of this exercise totally clear. Maybe many of the folks listening to this have already done the exercise with me and don't need this primer, but for the rest of you, here's how it works. There are 57 total cards in the deck. We are discussing them one by one here in this project. When you do your values with me, we sit across a table or on a couch together or at the sidebar of my coffee shop. I tell you to imagine the last timestamp of your life, the year since your divorce, the 5 years since you got married, the time since you started your job or since you retired, or maybe since you lost your spouse. I remind you that the goal is to identify the values that have most affected your choices in this specific season. You sort the deck into 3 piles. There's a yes pile, which are values that are core and central to your thinking. There's a maybe pile, which are values that you see as important but maybe not driving the bus. And then there's a no pile. Those are for values that are not resonating at this time. Once the deck is sorted, I take the maybe and no piles and I set them aside. And then you sort the yes pile again, and again, and again. You keep sorting until you end up with just 5. 5 central values that represent your life right now. I'm telling you all this because card number 24 is the first card we have discussed that made it into my top 5. I've gone back and forth on whether to disclose my own choices, but I've decided that I will, because my choice serves as a lens through which I see this value. I first did this exercise in August of 24, and when protection of the environment came up, I was surprised to see it survive the first sort, and then the second, and then the third, until eventually it sat there on the table as one of the 5 most currently important concepts to me. This was surprising because I didn't grow up around environmentalists. I didn't grow up around conservationists. The truth is, in the community where I grew up, the prevailing belief was, this is all going to burn. Jesus was on his way back, and when he got here, he was going to torch the place. So what's the point in saving anything? Compounding this was a political culture that viewed stewardship, at least in the way I understand it now, as a little suspicious. There were several outbuildings on the farm where I grew up, and in each of them was a clock radio or an old dusty boombox tuned to the local conservative talk radio station on the AM dial. Rush Limbaugh literally flavored my young life, milking cows, feeding sheep, calves, chickens, rabbits, dogs. I did it all under the thrall of the golden EIB microphone. I learned so much in my early life from that program, and the net effect was that I grew up not only not an environmentalist, but quite the opposite. I was an enviro-antagonist. There are actions I took back in those days that I can now only describe as vindictive towards the planet. I have been present for the burning of countless pieces of plastic. I know how to play with burning styrofoam in a way that is fun and destructive. I know exactly what sound batteries make in a burn barrel. I know a guy who buried multiple vehicles in a single hole just to get rid of them. It was like a great middle finger to Mother Earth. My dad, whom I love very much, would save old motor oil to pour down fence posts in order to preserve them. At best, these acts were lazy and inconsiderate to anyone who may be living on this planet in the future. At worst, it's a hijacking of our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren's good lives. The cracks in that worldview came from 2 places. The first was the mentor, the friend I mentioned in the last essay, the guy who got me into coffee and from whom I stole $250. He and his wife were Christians, like me, but a different flavor. They represented a perspective that said, maybe we're supposed to take care of this garden. differently. The second was Biology 131, 132, and 133. This was a 3-term course required for my ill-fated forestry degree. I went into that class ready to get my C and get out. Instead, it changed everything. It forced me to look at the complexity of the biological world and ultimately to appreciate and even to love it. I learned the hydrological cycle. I learned about nurse trees. I learned about fungus and decomposition. And I learned that the smoke from my burn barrel goes somewhere. I learned that just going away is a myth. I am deeply grateful for that professor's methodology, that it didn't scorn or humiliate or disdain my past, but instead simply brought us all along. And we all learned that not all logging is terrible. Not every use of a natural element is patently negative, but that a culture of extraction and profit will end up being problematic for us or for our children. But the moment it moved from my head to my heart was 2020. You may recall the world came unglued. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. George Floyd was murdered. Belarusians protested, and COVID shut us down. And then the West Coast caught fire. We experienced some of the worst wildfires in modern local history. 47 people died directly. More than 1,000 died from smoke inhalation. We all downloaded apps to track the air quality index. We huddled inside. We taped up our windows. We built air filters out of box fans. And I became enraged. We were smoked in for over a week. Orange skies all day, every day. I look back now and I see that was the moment I crested the mountain. I had been slowly learning about climate science for years, quietly changing my views. But in 2020, looking at that apocalyptic sky, I realized the "it's all gonna burn" theology came true. It just wasn't Jesus doing the burning. It was us. I believe in climate science. I believe we ignore it at our peril. I believe there are real consequences to a culture of extraction, combustion, and taking. So yes, this card is in my top 5. I used to feed the fire. Now I want to help put it out. I want to do more than not hurt. I want to make better. I want to leave it better than I found it in every situation that I can. So I avoid spraying chemicals on my land, and I develop water retention and soil microbiome building strategies for my pasture. And I have a plan to mitigate the damage caused by this damned emerald ash borer beetle.